welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. This is episode 36, and today we're talking about Home Assistant version 0.80. And with me, as usual, I have Phil. Hey, Phil.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. And we also have a special guest, Nikiya, today. Hey, Nikiya.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
So, whereabouts in the States are you from, Nikiya?
Originally, I'm from Los Angeles, but I live in New Hampshire now.
Ah, nice.
That is cool. Heard all good things about that place, so that's neat.
It's beautiful this time of year.
Yeah, it's for us. It's starting to get cold, so it's a little less beautiful. Getting sick.
Well, we have a lot of trees around here, so it's a lot of the changing of the color right now.
Yeah, we have that too right now, so that's a nice part. So, anyways, on with the episode. So, just in terms of a quick little announcement, Hacktoberfest is on. So, again, if you're not familiar with the program, it's run typically by DigitalOcean. They work with GitHub, I believe, as well. And basically, you work through different open source repos and such. And if you have 5 or more pull requests, then you get yourself a free t-shirt, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's not restricted to any, you don't have to be just in the US. It's anywhere in the world. I'm in Australia, which is like the other end of the planet, and I've got t-shirts from this. So, yeah, definitely get involved if you can.
Yeah, it's very cool. And Home Assistant, I know in the past years has participated, and I believe it's we're doing it again this year.
Yeah, I think they're already at on the main repo. There are over 104 pull requests have been merged already, and 234 pull requests have been done on the documentation site as well.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, so even if you don't know Python, but you can improve maybe some spelling or grammar in the docs that you've seen, open up a pull request and you get yourself a free t-shirt if you do 5 of them. And it doesn't have to be just Home Assistant, and it doesn't have to be any particular repo. As long as it's an open source repo on GitHub, it doesn't have to be particularly listed or participating in Hacktoberfest, you will earn yourself a t-shirt. So yeah, there's a lot of projects that you can help out with. That
is very cool. And we'll leave the link for that in the show notes.
Of course.
And I believe Home Assistant will have a link for that as well on the website. On to 0.80. So we're starting out with a new webhook component. If you're not familiar with that, basically what you can do is you can utilize the webhook with any other third-party applications. And you can use that to fire off, different automations or whatever. Phil, do you use any kind of webhook pieces today in any of your projects? And not Home Assistant related, but...
Well, no, not Home Assistant yet, but I believe I will be now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the company I work for, we do a lot of webhook based things. So yeah, I'm definitely familiar with the concept, and I know how powerful this is. It's going to be particularly useful for people that use if this then that. So what you can do in that program is you could have, for example, say you complete a task in your shopping list. You could then have if to send a webhook to Home Assistant to do anything, flash your lights, make an announcement, or anything like that. Webhooks are really powerful. They're also going to be great. There's a lot of other apps, for example, Sonar, Radar, maybe headphones, that will actually send webhooks when they do something. For example, if a download completes, they will send off a webhook through your local network. In the future, you might be able to integrate this with Home Assistant as well. So you can say, hey, here you go watch it.
That's right.
So yeah, very powerful, this new webhook component. So very excited for that one.
Yeah.
Another great feature that's been added is the GitLab continuous integration sensor. So this allows users that have their Home Assistant config posted to GitLab as opposed to GitHub to have a continuous integration job, which basically would spin up a Docker container of Home Assistant whenever you do a push into GitLab, check that you haven't accidentally put 1 space instead of 2 spaces in the YAML, and then give you the thumbs up and say, yep, this all passes the tests, go ahead and restart Home Assistant, you won't have a problem. So you can actually get that now as a sensor in Home Assistant. So that's a great little addition if you're a GitLab user.
Yeah, and the nice thing is you can, again, and you kind of alluded to this, is you can maybe even track Home Assistant as the GitLab repo that you want to use. So as you make changes and such, just run it through a test.
I wonder if you could then just use that webhook component as well. Once GitLab says, hey, this all passes the build, go ahead, fire off a webhook to Home Assistant, and then Home Assistant just reboots itself.
Yeah, that's definitely doable.
It's cool to see how all these little components, they might, in isolation, they may not make sense, but when you see how they can communicate with each other, it's where you get the real powerful stuff.
For sure. IKEA TAD-free switches. There's more support for the wall switches that IKEA has released with TAD-free. So
we don't even have the light bulbs here. like in Australia. That really frustrates me.
Oh, really? I've been wanting to
Yeah.
play with it, but I haven't. It's basically is what it is. It's my whole big holdup right now is I want to redo all of my Z-Wave Zigbee stuff, and I want to get rid of my external hubs and things like that, and just collapse it all into a Raspberry Pi. So I it's a big enough undertaking on itself that I haven't done it yet. So
Yeah, I've been there.
yeah, when I do that, then I'll eventually get to it.
Now, there was another addition that was in the docs. They may have removed it, but I do want to mention that there was a new Hacktoberfest Discovery API added in 0.80. I'm not sure if they pulled it out at the last minute. I did see it in the release notes coming up. If it's not available in 0.80, at least in the future, Home Assistant will be able to detect which Hacktoberfest add-ons you have enabled, and then can set up the necessary components in Home Assistant. So this is going to be a big deal for anyone that's a Hacktoberfest or HackOS user in the future.
Yeah.
What you'll be able to do is go into the add-ons page, and the example that they had on the docs originally was you could add the MQTT component in the add-ons from Hacktoberfest. Home Assistant will then detect that you've added that MQTT component into Hacktoberfest and say, hey, do you want to also enable the MQTT side of things in Home Assistant? And then you don't have to go in and change your configuration and set up all the, the URL and the username and password. Hacktoberfest and the Discovery API will just handle that for you. So if it's not available in 0.80, it's definitely coming, and this is a really exciting feature. So yeah, if you're a Hacktoberfest user, you should be really excited about this.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's especially for non-technical users or people that just want to get this off the ground and get it working.
Exactly.
That's huge. It's that many less clicks, that many less steps to do, right? So
yeah, it's bringing that whole turnkey solution into it. It's just everything's tightly integrated and it just all talks to each other and it knows what to do.
Yeah, totally. Also, we have taps, faucets, showers, sprinklers, and valves. We have the ability to add all of those things to HomeKit now, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I really want to know where these smart showers are, because that's cool. And also that HomeKit has the ability to do all these, like has a separate, shower component or a sprinkler component, I'm guessing, in HomeKit. That's cool. Unless it just becomes a switch, which probably actually that may make more sense.
Yeah, well, I know you get automatic valves and such, right? So let's say, for example, you detect a leak and you want to cut the water supply to the house or something like that, right? You just put it on your water main and you can do that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like showers and stuff, I mean, maybe that's the same, but sprinklers, I would assume that's the same. But yeah, showers would be interesting because, can you do things like, again, change temperature, right? And at what point does it change the temperature and stop changing the temperature, right? Too hot, like you don't like. Or way too cold, right?
Or someone starts streaming Netflix and you're yelling at the shower to, hey, turn it colder, and you have to wait for that delay for the cloud to come back and say, oh, that's the command you said. Yeah, I'll turn it down for you.
Yeah, exactly. And knowing my luck, if I did that, I'd yell at my Echo and say, hey, make it warmer, and then it'll just keep going. And when I say, okay, that's good, at that point, that's when it'll decide it doesn't want to understand me. So
of course.
So,
considering that every now and then my Lutron switches will just turn off and on randomly, I don't think I'm going to hook it up to my shower.
yeah, there you go. That's interesting. I've never run into that issue with Lutron, but that's there's always a possibility of doing that kind of stuff. Right?
Well, I have a theory that I still need to test out. I believe it's that I have both Lutron switches and I also have some Philips Hue bulbs in those light sockets.
Gotcha. Just a quick switch.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, yeah, hopefully you get that figured out.
Yeah, definitely. But for that reason, I wouldn't quite trust the shower yet.
No, definitely.
Yeah, it can definitely ruin your morning or night or whatever.
Some breaking changes in the new release 0.80. The Tibber platform has been removed into its own component. So if you're using that as a sensor, it's now its own component, and you'll need to update your configuration for that.
Yeah, the Philips Hue platform won't use Discovery anymore if it was set up manually. So basically, if you've been using it for a while, before Discovery, before the Discovery functionality came in, and that's not the new Discovery, that's the original Discovery function, then you might have the Hue piece in your config file. So if you have that, then it actually won't auto-discover any new lights anymore. And if you want to do that at that point, then go through the Hue setup wizard in the config panel.
Yeah, just moving more things away from that YAML file into the main Home Assistant UI.
Yeah, exactly.
The Netatmo public weather stations that were recently added into Home Assistant now have more sensor values added to them. They include temperature, pressure, humidity, rain, wind strength, and gust strength. Because of all the new sensors that have been added, you'll need to specify them in monitored conditions in your configuration. So if you're using the public Netatmo weather sensor, just be sure to go and check that out.
If you use Home Assistant native OAuth 2 for Google Assistant, that may break for you. The flow that they use to connect Google to OAuth basically has, from what I understand, has been changed a little bit. So you'll need to relink your Google account and update your config.yaml. Basically, remove your client ID, access token, and your agent user ID.
Also, updates for the ratio sprinkler component. It no longer requires you to specify the switch and binary sensor platforms. They'll be initialized automatically. So make sure you remove the switch and binary sensor entries for the ratio platform from your configuration if you're using that.
And the Blink component, apparently that's been completely overhauled, which is kind of cool. So, but no notification sensors are exposed, and that means for things like motion and such, you can use your binary sensor as well to detect it. Also, there's a couple of other changes. Things like Snap a Picture service has been changed to a trigger camera. And any cameras that you use they get prefaced with Blink when they're added to Home Assistant. That includes if you have them already.
Yeah, so that'll be changing entity IDs when you reboot, so watch out for that one.
Exactly, yeah.
And some other noteworthy updates. It's a really big release, this one, because of Hacktoberfest.
That's cool.
Yeah. The one I'm really looking forward to is the daily or hourly mode has been added to the dark sky weather sensor. So now you can specify whether the forecasts will be displayed in Home Assistant for the next few hours or for the next few days. I'm personally using the dark sky sensor for the weather card in Lovelace. So I'm hoping when I update to 0.80, I can just flick that over and in the cards, it'll display the next few days, the forecast. So I'm looking forward to trying that out.
That's kind of neat. Also, image support has been added to Hangouts. So with using Hangouts as a notification, you can now have images. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, snap a picture of a camera, send it through to your Hangout chat. That's cool.
Yeah, you can see who's at the door or something like that. That's very cool.
If you're using the Google Maps platform for presence detection, you now have the ability to see your phone's battery level and your charging status, which is something I believe we spoke in the last episode that the iOS app can do. So now it's cool that if you're on Android and you're using the Google Maps platform, you can see that now. Some automations that you might want to do with this could be sending an alert to a significant other when your battery's almost out of battery, and also detecting when your phone is charging at night. You might be able to put the house into sleep mode automatically as opposed to having to yell out good night to the Amazon Echo or something. So yeah. Some cool stuff there.
That is neat. Oh, but on the note of the iOS app, so I've been playing with the beta quite a bit. I got rid of my using SmartThings using the SmartThings app as a location.
You got rid of it finally.
Oh my god, guys! The app is amazing. And I tweeted about it. Quite a few people were like, "Whoa, that's cool." Somebody actually, and one of the things I realized is I've actually able to use that through my single sign-on. So
yeah, nice.
Which is amazing. So great enhancements, guys. So kudos to the iOS team.
Does the iOS app let you view it in Lovelace?
Not to my knowledge. I might be wrong. So my Lovelace attempts every time have been pretty catastrophic. So temporarily, I have given up on trying to get that to work. I'm using the normal UI. So I believe it uses the normal one, but maybe somebody can shoot us an email and let us know if they've had that experience with Lovelace. And I would assume Lovelace would have to be your default.
Well, I'm curious because I'm using the alpha version of the Android app.
Oh, okay.
While it doesn't use Lovelace, I know they're already talking about that being a future feature.
Interesting. Okay, that's kind of cool. Yeah, I don't see why it wouldn't if Lovelace is your default, but I could be wrong. That's a good question for Robbie, actually. Next time we chat with him, we can ask him. Also, logbook enhancements. Any incoming commands that you spit out through your Echo will actually get logged in Logbook. So that's kind of handy. So just to know, if you're having any trouble between your Echo and Home Assistant, it's great for troubleshooting that a bit as well. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So Nikiya, on to you. What's going on with you? What's your Home Assistant story? We want to know.
All right. So I started with Home Assistant back in May. Previous to that, I had been, like I had mentioned before when we were talking. Prior to the podcast, I'm kind of a tech enthusiast. So I had been doing a lot of stuff with Google Home and Chromecast and things of that nature. And when I got into a new house, I wanted to make it more of a smart home. So I added a lot of Nest components, MyQ garage door openers, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And during my research, I came across Home Assistant, which obviously adds a lot more components to the fray than Google Home, especially at the time.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the list. You've got you've got smart things, you've got Nest, you've got smart locks, you've got so many smoke detectors and thermostats and an alarm system. So you've done it really well. I'm very jealous. How long have you just started with wanting to use home automation, or have you previously done home automation before?
I've looked into it before, but obviously, all the major companies are a little expensive, especially for what they offer. I had a whole home audio system. I forget the name of the company now, but it had some automation features just for the audio. But anything like blinds or anything like that, you look into the price and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I was waiting for something that I could do with my home. When Google started coming out with their home products, I jumped all over that because I'm big into the Google ecosystem anyways. And so that was a natural fit for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm also pretty jealous of, and I know you mentioned you have a gigabit internet connection, so I'm pretty jealous of that.
Oh, the dream.
I know.
Yeah, that was offered. This is a brand new neighborhood, so obviously Comcast who's my cable provider, is putting all their new equipment in here, and yeah, that's definitely made things a little bit easier.
yeah, that's not bad at all. I mean, I think my community specifically has, I think we can go up to 250 megs, which isn't bad. I'm on 100 meg. I think Phil could use the most out of all of us.
I'm sorry, guys.
So since then, it's just been building onto it. One of the things that I don't know if you guys have seen is Google Home recently updated their home application.
Yeah.
It's funny because I know now that my user interface for Home Assistant will never be used by anyone in my family because they will just go through the Google Home app.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now that you've got the visual representation, now Home Assistant still serves a purpose there because I can feed a lot more devices into Google Home than I would be able to without it.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a bit like HomeKit as well. I think if you're an iOS user, you may not necessarily use the Home Assistant app if you've got everything available to Siri via the Apple Home app. So same sort of situation there.
Yeah, even if nothing, it works as a good platform to normalize everything, right?
Absolutely. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen the new Google Home app, and actually played with it, but it's interesting because one of the things you brought up earlier was how is it going to see it? So it sees my garage doors as switches, where on is closed and off is open. But it's interesting to see how it interprets the data from Home Assistant as well. But it also makes it so that I'm now going to go in and change my whole setup so that it makes more sense in the Google Home app.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense. Yeah. So how long have you been on the Home Assistant ecosystem then?
So Home Assistant I've been doing since May.
Okay.
And that's added a lot of stuff. I'm not, as I had mentioned to you guys in my email, I'm not a programmer or technically inclined to that level by any stretch, but I'm not afraid to tinker. I've built my own computers. I've done things of that nature. I'm not afraid to copy and paste a little code here.
Sure.
YAML, the more I use it, the more it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of people have that initial hurdle where they look at YAML and they go, "Oh, it's code," and well, it sort of is, but if you take the time and just understand it, eventually the flows make sense. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot more sense than when I try and go and look in Python and figure out what's going on there.
Fair enough. Slowly but surely.
But I've always been one of those people that dives in. It's how I got into HTML coding too. I dive into the source code and see if I can figure out some of the stuff that's going on.
Sure.
Nice. What are you using to run Home Assistant? Using a Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, Raspberry Pi. I'm using Hass.io, and that's been great so far. And I see people in the forums a lot of times ask, how many devices can a Raspberry Pi handle and whatnot. And I've got 70 something devices on here, and it's not even blinking.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
That is cool. Yeah.
So I think the way that the code is optimized makes I think you'd have to really have a lot of devices to overload it via that way.
Do you find rebooting the Pi to be slow with that many devices?
No, I can have it. I can turn it off and have it back up and running in say 5 minutes.
Okay, that's reasonable.
Yeah, it's not bad.
The one thing that I do find, and I'm trying to figure out the solution, and it may be not going the discoverable route, but inputting it all manually, is I have a lot of Chromecast devices, and it does not always pick all of them up. And so I'm thinking if I set, IP addresses and put it in manually, that may help with that.
Yeah, I'm guessing if one of the devices goes to sleep, it might not get detected in time or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
So how many people do you have in your smart home? Is it just you that utilizes it, or do you have a couple of people? Or
my wife and I, as well as our 3 kids. My wife has a love-hate relationship with the smart home. She loves the convenience it brings when it works, but it hates me and everything I do with our house when it doesn't.
Yeah.
I know that feel all too well.
Well, the smart home is a full-time production system. You can't have a second of downtime, because as soon as a switch doesn't work, you will feel the support tickets coming your way very quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's actually why I also switched because I had originally started to use Philips Hue bulbs, which I still have some of them in, but I wanted to use that for my smart light solution. And I quickly realized that people intuitively hit the switches.
Yes.
So you have to, so that's why I switched over to Lutron and installed Lutron switches throughout my house. That way they can be controlled smartly or the standard way.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? Especially and even people that use it all day every day, fine, you can almost train yourself to be like, oh, hey, I shouldn't flip the switch or whatever, but you have a guest that comes in and boom, everything, all that's out the window, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can even install, those battery operated switches, but then you have double switches everywhere.
Yeah, that one's not.
Well, as a renter that can't change the physical switches, I found the best way to do it is to put a little bit of masking tape over the switch. Keep it on and just put a little bit of masking tape. And as soon as someone goes to flick that switch, they feel the masking tape and realize, I'm not supposed to turn that switch off.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's the only kind of caveat there, right? Is sometimes you don't have a choice, right? Like in your case. So, but so how do you and your family interact with your home automation? Is it primarily through voice, or is it Do you use a combination of that in the app?
It's primarily through our voice and through Google Home and whatnot. I use my phone and the Home Assistant user interface. I'm the only one that uses that, but I like playing with it. I like a lot of the stuff you can do with Lovelace. I think I can eventually build a prettier user interface with Lovelace than Google Home or anything that just automatically populates everything.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's done through the Google Home devices.
Fair enough. Okay, that's cool. So it's interesting because one of the things you mentioned is like talking about how using Lovelace as to use the actual UI. And earlier we were talking about my lack of experience, I guess let's call it, with Lovelace. And it was interesting. So for me personally, I realized I barely log into the interface unless I need to check something, right? Almost everything is either an automation or done through voice to override the automation or to go around the automation, right? So it's that, I don't know. For me, that was another thing where I was kind of like, I don't know if I is it worth the time investment in upgrading or in rebuilding my UI to be Lovelace based, right? So for you, I guess it sounds like you do use it though.
Yeah, and for me, it's more the coolness factor.
Yeah,
I like having a picture of my living room and having device switches for all of them at the bottom of it. And eventually, I'd like to do the floor plan. I think that's an incredible feature.
Yeah,
but I know it's for me. It's
sure.
It's a lot easier for everyone else to just call out to Google and have it do its thing.
But also, I think if you've got guests and stuff coming into your home, they may not know all the things that they can say to Google. So having a tablet like I have on the wall with Lovelace, and if you've got the floor plan, it might make it a bit more guest-friendly as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that that I was going to do is I have a spare iPad that I was going to repurpose as the UI. But I think, at least for my wife and most likely my family, the new little Google Home touchscreen thing that they have coming out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably going to do it for most of them.
Cool. I mean, that's awesome. I'd actually be very curious to know how that works if and when you do it. So please keep us posted on that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of fun playing around with this stuff. I'm trying to get presence detection figured out, which I understand is pretty much everyone's headache.
Yeah.
Right now I'm using Google Maps, but there's false positives when I'm at home. So I've had to shut off my garage door automations.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to figure something else out. I'm thinking, what was the one my father-in-law had told me about? Because he uses Home Assistant as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, he actually got me the Raspberry Pi for my birthday, and when he got it for me, he got himself one to build it because he knew what I was planning on doing. But he uses some sort of, I think it's Nmap,
yes,
for presence detection. So I've been thinking about trying to install that and figure out how to make that work so that when my phone connects, it automatically opens my garage door. But even that's problematic because I have Wi-Fi in my truck, so my phone is typically still connected to my truck's Wi-Fi until I turn it off.
That's a bit tricky.
Yeah. You can try playing with the priorities and stuff from the Wi-Fi network. But yeah, no, that is still...
You could potentially get another Raspberry Pi and stick it in the garage and then use Bluetooth to detect, to basically put out a pulse, and when it detects maybe your truck's Bluetooth from the radio or even your phone's Bluetooth, because it's outside as well. Once it sees you coming home, then it can know, all right, the car's just arrived now, open up the garage door.
Yeah.
I've thought about doing that. Bluetooth Low Energy, I've heard some of those beacons are pretty good. I've also thought about just adding some conditions to my Google Maps automation. Say it only opens if it hasn't seen me home for the past 10 minutes.
Right.
Something of that nature.
I guess one of the simple things you could do is once the garage door opens and that automation fires, you can then just turn that automation off. and then have another automation that goes, all right, this automation's been off for half an hour. I can turn it back on now. And that way it won't fire repeatedly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Or I wonder if this would be possible. That's basically what you were saying is turn it off and then have another automation maybe that turns that automation on when it sees me leave.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
That way you won't get, if you're already home, it won't sit there and constantly open up your garage door.
Yeah. Well, no, it wasn't a problem of constantly opening. What it would do is, my GPS would get a false signal that I was a little bit out of my home zone.
I had that same problem.
And then it would signal that I was back in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Yeah. So that's why I'm thinking something where I put a timer on it. I very rarely leave my house for a short period of time. So I could even say something like, if it hasn't seen me home in 20 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so that's one of the major automations that I'm looking into is having the garage door open and shut. I wish Nest and Yale would be a little bit more forthcoming with their APIs for their lock.
Yeah.
So that's made me, although Google Home can now lock it, so that helps.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
The unlocking is typically they do it on purpose just so you can't yell and, say, hey, unlock the door. Like anybody can just say it really loudly and what have you, right?
Yeah, I just wish, because Nest and Yale are working together, but now Yale is also working with, who's the other major lock company?
August.
Quickset.
August.
Yeah.
August. They're also working with August. So they're putting some of the modules for the presence detection for unlocking into some of the Yale locks. But considering August and Nest are competing, I highly doubt it's going to come to the Nest X Yale lock.
Yeah.
But that's one thing that's had me thinking about migrating over to the August home locks.
So you have so many devices and that you seem to have integrated. What would be some of the most coolest automations that you're proud of? Like that, maybe it doesn't even have to be like, oh, you've got the garage door opening, but what's something that's even like, that you're proud of in particular?
So I guess the one that I like is actually, it's so simple, but being able to just say, well, I first, let me say I have a young child that, she's just 3.5 now.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm carrying her down the stairs, being able to tell Google to turn on Netflix and what channel to put it, what show to put on, that's awesome. That's probably my favorite thing right there.
Yeah. Especially when you don't have your hands free.
Exactly. That, and now that I have the lights, when we're all leaving for the day or to go out for something, being able to say, turn all lights off and not having to worry about anything.
Yep.
That's another good one.
That's cool. Yeah. Sometimes it's the simple ones you use those all the time, right? They basically replace having to do something.
Absolutely. I mean, Google Home. So we have Google Homes in just about every room in the house.
Yeah.
And that has brought so much more music into our house just because it's so simple.
Yep. Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Yeah. I love the integration of Home Assistant and Google Home. I wanted to get maybe a Echo of some sort because I know there's some skills that you can do on the Echo that you can't necessarily do on the Google that I'm interested in tinkering with. But I'm so ingrained into the Google ecosystem, I can't see wholeheartedly switching out ever.
Yeah, it gets a little annoying too if you have multiple ecosystems, right? And now it's a lot more thought in terms of, hey, do I say my Echo's name or do I say my Google Home's name, right? And, which does what functionality. You almost have to have a little matrix in your head, right, at all times. So.
Well, that's one of the things that's good about Home Assistant is you can at least make your own commands for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So that way you program them into your head as that command rather than thinking about what device or whatnot it is.
Yeah, no, for sure. Agreed.
I just can't get over that mouthful of having to say okay and then Google all the time.
Yeah. Anyways, I mean, yeah, this has been awesome. Do you have anything else to tell us? Or
yeah, I mean, I would just say, I think this podcast is probably preaching to the choir for the most part. But anybody that's thinking about tinkering with this stuff, it seems a lot more overwhelming than it actually is once you get into it. And just take your time. I mean, the house that I've built out. Obviously, I spent quite a bit of time on this, but, it's still only taken me, I probably had it fully functioning within like 4 months.
That's not bad, actually. That's not bad at all.
Especially when you look at the number of devices, all the smoke detectors, all the different variations that you've got. So, yeah, 4 months is pretty good.
That's really good.
Well, and I had to rebuild from scratch a few times too, because I don't know if this was just an earlier version of Home Assistant's problem, or maybe I wasn't giving it enough time. But it seemed like whenever I lost power, I couldn't get back into my system.
Oh.
And I'd have to end up rebuilding it from scratch until, I started being a little bit smarter and saving my YAML files and making it a little bit easier on myself.
Yeah, for sure.
But that was definitely a hurdle that I had to overcome in the beginning.
Nice.
Yeah. But I thank you guys a lot for this podcast, because it's been interesting hearing other people's stories and just kind of hearing other people's use cases for Home Assistant.
Well, absolutely. A lot of people have different ways of doing the same thing, right? And it's always interesting to hear another person's perspective on how they would tackle the problem. I'm sure you're not the only person that's got their garage door opening up in the middle of the night accidentally because their GPS was out of range for some reason. So it's cool to see how other people are solving those issues as well.
Well, yeah, and I mean, one of the issues that the community definitely solved for me is Sony Bravias are an automatic discoverable component. But if you have multiple of them, it will not discover multiple. It will discover all of them, but you can't have them all added at the same time. Even if you go in and alter the YAML manually, using that way, it doesn't work. So I had to use a custom component that the community built, put my IP addresses in manually and all that. But now it sees all my TVs, and nice. I can use the functionality.
That's cool.
That's neat. Yeah, it's the community is fantastic especially for that kind of stuff, right? So it's no, that's wicked.
I just wish there was, and it's funny because it's. Everybody's doing their own thing, but I wish there was somebody that was aggregating a lot of these sources so that you knew where to look for things.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Frank, who does a lot of the Home Assistant Hass.io add-ons, he's created an awesome HA list, which is up on GitHub. I'll leave a link in the show notes. But if you're looking for blogs or YouTube channels or anything like that, there's a whole list of all Home Assistant related stuff that you can just go through. And
oh, that's cool.
As things like Hacktober and so on and so forth are going, the documentation itself is getting a lot better too. And that's something that's always been kind of a work in progress, and there's always been improvement requirements to improve. Slowly but surely. I think it's getting there. I don't think it's there yet, but it's starting to go in the right direction. So. Yeah, so
I would say of all the hubs that I've used, which I've used Wink, SmartThings, Wink was probably the next best, but Home Assistant was the most complete, user-friendly solution that I was able to find.
It's interesting that you say that, because I know Home Assistant gets a lot of negative, especially when comparing things like SmartThings, is that you have to know how to code and the documentation is not up to scratch. So it's interesting that you would say, look, I saw these commercial products and even Home Assistant was easier to use than those.
Absolutely. I would say as far as the full functionality of it, you have to tinker a little bit, but to get the functionality that a lot of people try to get from SmartThings, you have to actually code.
Yeah.
And that's a lot more difficult. Wink, if you're using products that connect to it, is a great product. And I hope that one continues to grow as well.
Well, Nikiya, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your Home Assistant install. I'm very jealous of your setup. You seem like you've
Same.
Yeah, got a good setup there. So congratulations, well done with that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. And like I said, thank you guys for the podcast. It's been a great help in getting me up and running.
Absolutely, our pleasure.
You're more than welcome. And if you want to come on and join your Home Assistant story as well, reach out to us, feedback@haspodcast.io. We always love hearing how people are using Home Assistant.
Perfect.
Thank you guys very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.